Hey guys, I was very lucky to receive and to have the opportunity to test out the Fujifilm GFX100S that was sent to us by Fujifilm Canada. We just want to say a big thank you to Fujifilm Canada for loaning us the camera and lenses. It is our first time collaborating with a big camera company and we're very excited. But we're not paid to say anything besides our own opinions. Let's get straight to the point. I used the GFX100S and the GF110mm F2 and the GF50mm F3.5 lens for both a day and a night portrait photography session with my friends. The results from the daytime session was absolutely amazing and the user experience is much more fun compared to the night session, which means lighting is very important when it comes to using the GFX100S. This is a very important factor to consider if you are thinking of getting the GFX100S. This is not a spontaneous photo capturing camera. You need good lighting in order for the huge medium format sensor to capture the photos. I would say this is definitely one of the best cameras for jobs where all the lights are perfectly set up, artificial or natural lights. This is similar if you are thinking about using a cinema camera without proper lighting. You might get a better experience using a smartphone to film in that case. With proper lighting, the cinema camera or the GFX100S will produce much higher quality images. I want to point that out because I was not using the GFX100S in an ideal situation during the night session. I didn't use any artificial lights because I really want to test and see if the camera can handle low street light kind of situations, but it was struggling to focus and it was even not allowing me to take the photo at all when it was not in focus. I was trying to look into the settings of the camera to see if there's anything that prevents me from taking photos when the camera thinks that it is not in focus, but I left the camera settings as default, so maybe a firmware update can fix that. I was pressing the shutter button so hard, but it just wouldn't take the photo. If you know what happened, please let me know in the comment section below. Again, this is an extreme example of using this camera. When the camera was able to focus, the images coming out of the camera is absolutely stunning and the dynamic range is so good that you can pretty much bring up the shadows up to 3 to 4 stops. I tested the dynamic range by taking some photos that were extremely backlit and they look great to me after editing. I was using the classic chrome film simulation on the GFX100S the whole time because I think it looks great for straight out of camera portrait photos. I tried using the new nostalgic next simulation. I think it looks nice for buildings and travel photos more than portraits. It is a little too stylish for portraits to me, so I was sticking with the classic chrome. There's something magical when you're using classic chrome on the GFX100S during nighttime that I don't get with my other Fujifilm cameras. It produces a very film movie scene-like look photos, especially in low light. Again, I did not tweak anything in the camera or the film simulation, so I'm pretty sure it is because of the medium format sensor. I think it has to do with how the camera handles highlight roll-off. The transition going from light to dark on the subject's skin is so smooth that the photos just look like a movie scene or a painting. If you are looking for a camera that can give you the movie-like in photos, the GFX100S definitely has the magic. I was also testing the camera to see if it is capable for capturing actions like dancing because I myself is a dancer and all my friends in the photos are dancers as well. The result is not that great as expected. 5 frames per second is not great when you're trying to capture things like people jumping, turning, or doing a move. But if you are using it to capture slower things like, let's say, weddings or portraits, no problem at all. By the way, it wasn't slow in burst mode because of the autofocus. I was using single point autofocus, not continuous autofocus during the test, just to make sure it is just the burst mode that is doing the work. One thing I really enjoy using not only the GFX100S but all my other Fujifilm cameras is that the low light noise does not look like noise. They are more like film grain to me, especially when they don't usually produce ugly color noise. If you're worried that using a medium format camera will give you a lot of low light noise, you don't have to worry too much on the GFX100S. The in-body image stabilization is also very good. I was able to have my shutter speed floating between 125th of a second and 200th of a second throughout the night session without any issues. It is the type of stabilization that will kick in when you have pressed the shutter button. That's my experience of using the GFX100S during the night. Let's talk about where this camera really shines, when there's good lighting. which brings us to the daytime portrait photo walk. During the day session, the autofocus on the GFX100S was very quick and accurate, just like any other modern-day Fujifilm cameras, the X-T4, the X100V, XS10, or the XE4. However, I still find myself using single-point autofocus more than relying on the face detect autofocus because it tends to not pick up the face and eye often enough, or it will just see a face somewhere else in the frame. The result of the daytime session is so good because of the huge medium format sensor and the amazing GF lenses. The images are so sharp and clean that you can keep zooming in on an image and you can still see all the details. Remember, I said I don't really like modern day cameras' super clinical sharpness. This time is different. The images are very sharp, but not clinically sharp like, let's say, on the Sony a7 III. I think it has to do with the same reason, the medium format sensor. The highlight roll-off and the transition between in-focus and out-of-focus area is just so smooth that the images don't feel sharp to me, but they look very detailed, if that makes sense. I feel like a lot of modern-day cameras always give me this super 3D pop between the in-focus and out-of-focus area, which is something I really don't like because it looks almost fake to me. The subject is always like it was cut and paste onto the background. With the GFX100S, the subject is naturally blending into the background without the 3D fake pop, but still have a good subject isolation. To be honest with you, the straight out of camera images are so good that you don't really need that much editing besides cropping. Trust me, for normal non-photographer friends and family, they will be way more than happy to see the straight out of camera JPEGs. Unless you're doing a job for a magazine or a publication, you don't really need to edit the photos. That actually brings us to the editing process of using the GFX100S. It was not easy, just like you would expect. The biggest raw files are about 200 megabytes per photo, and that is about 4 times as big as the raw files from the X-T4. You will need a more powerful computer for sure, and forget about mobile editing on your iPad or iPhone. It will take forever. I know it might sound weird, but I really enjoy editing my photos using Lightroom Mobile because of convenience. Usually after a photo session, I will import the raw files onto my iPad mini and start editing them with my friends and give them the final product. But too bad even my iPhone 11 Pro Max cannot really handle the huge files from the GFX100S. Maybe the new iPad or iPhone can? When I got home, I was able to import the raw photos onto my 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro and edit them using the Photos app. You might be super surprised, but that is because I don't have Lightroom on my Mac, and the Photos app is actually a lot more powerful than a lot of people think. I will make a separate video on how to do it because the app is free. I was able to edit all the GFX100S raw photos the way I wanted, and they all look absolutely stunning to me. The amount of details is unmatchable compared to my other cameras. You can do pretty much up to a 400% crop and it will still look very nice. I feel like that kind of makes composition during the photo session kind of too easy. As I mentioned earlier, I have the opportunity to test out both the GF110mm F2 and the GF50mm F3.5 lens. The GF110mm is probably going to be the most popular lens of choice when it comes to portrait photography because of its super sharp performance and the really nice bokeh or background blur rendition. You can pretty much do 80% of portrait styles with this lens as long as you have the space. But I also like using the 50mm F3.5 lens for portrait photos because I can use it for more creative angle photos like the ones you see on the staircase. As I always say, you don't always have to blur out everything in the background. It is a creative choice. By the way, since the GFX100S is a medium format camera, you actually have to do the conversion of focal length by multiplying 0.7 to get the full frame equivalent focal length. So the 110mm is actually a 77mm, and the 50mm is actually a 35mm lens in full frame terms. I think having both the 110mm and the 50mm can pretty much cover 95% of all I need for portrait photo sessions. I don't think you should go with anything longer than 100mm in full frame unless you don't want anyone to see the background at all, which kind of defeats the purpose of doing an outdoor photography. Anything wider than 35mm full frame is kind of too distorted even if it is distortion corrected, unless you are using it for creative purposes. But I don't think a lot of people will need that kind of focal length for regular portrait photos. Okay, let's talk about the things that I think Fujifilm can improve on the GFX100S either through software updates or in the next version. The camera is very slow, like much slower than the X-T4 or even older cameras like my X Pro 2. I'm talking about even during the operation of the camera. Sometimes going through the menu still feel laggy for some reasons. I know the camera has to process super big 100 megapixels files and I'm not blaming it being slow on loading the photos, which will take you a good 2 to 3 seconds if you want to review the photos. But why is there a 2 to 3 seconds lag when you put your eye up to the EVF? It was very annoying when I put my eye up to the EVF and I had to wait for it to turn on, especially if you're doing anything fast-paced. The display and the EVF don't seem too much higher resolution than the X-T4, so I don't know why there is a huge lag. Hopefully that can be fixed by firmware updates. But there is another very important slow issue with the GFX100S. The blackout between photos is very obvious. When you're capturing the biggest JPEG and RAW, there is a very obvious 1-second blackout between photos. That can be pretty annoying even when you're not taking photos of anything fast, because we're so used to not having any blackouts on modern day cameras. I know the camera has to write the 100 megapixels files onto the SD card, which I think they should use something faster than SD cards, but the display doesn't have to be blacked out, right? It is not displaying the full resolution on the display anyway, so hopefully they can do something about the blackout with, again, firmware updates. Don't get me wrong, as I said in the beginning, this camera is not meant to be fast. It is meant for taking photos when everything's ready and you take the photos one by one, but not for you to keep snapping photos like you're using a smaller sensor camera. I don't think people will keep bursting photos if you are doing, let's say, a fashion magazine job. By the way, just in case if you're wondering, I was using a UHS 2 SD card already, so the write and read speed should be okay, but there's still a blackout period and it takes a couple of seconds to play back the photos. The last thing I want to mention is the size and weight of the GFX100S and the lenses. They are very heavy if you're coming from an APS-C or a full-frame camera. It feels about double the weight of all my other camera setups. After using the GFX100S, I feel like my X Pro 2 is like a toy. But keep in mind, you are getting more than double the resolution with the GFX100S, and the GFX100S is actually considered as a compact and lightweight medium format camera, and it is very true. So hopefully people don't expect it to be super powerful but as light as a full-frame camera. That is kind of expecting the wrong things. To me, I got used to the weight after carrying the camera around my neck and walking around for 2 hours. It is definitely not light, but I think you will get used to it. Oh, I almost forgot to mention about the battery life. It is very good, just like the X-T4. They both use the same battery. I was able to get about 250 RAW plus JPEGs and I have only used 1 bar out of 4. So you don't really have to worry about not being able to use a battery grip. When it comes to price, I don't want to comment too much because if you are using the GFX100S to make money and it suits your workflow, it is actually not an expensive camera at all. If you want to buy it as a hobbyist or even an enthusiast, I think you might be better off getting something smaller. I actually forgot about mentioning the video capability of the GFX100S, and it is actually really good. To be honest with you, I think you can really do some great video work with the GFX100S because as you can see, the test footage that I did, it's just a couple of random footage that I recorded during the photo walk and also my street photography session. So I think the bitrate and also the video quality, image quality is really good, and I really don't see any moire or any problems or aliasing or anything like that when it comes to the video capability. So the GFX100S if you are using it for, let's say, wedding photography and videography, you can definitely do both things within one camera. So that's why I think this camera is actually not that expensive if you are using it for a paid job. At the end of the day, I was very impressed by the image quality coming out of the Fujifilm GFX100S, and I think it is such an amazing camera for its purposes. I got used to the camera almost immediately because it is pretty much the same as other Fujifilm cameras, just with a bigger sensor. If you need the best quality on the market, the GFX100S is a great choice. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. What super high resolution cameras have you used before? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.